Okay, so alive. Welcome back to the Magic Minds podcast. I'm Matt Burke. You're watching and listening to the Liberties #1 podcast. We're the best podcast in Dublin 8. Yup, the Liberties. Yup, the Flats. We have another belter for you today. Today is with a lady called Kelly Bermingham. Kelly is the community outreach coordinator in St. Patrick's Cathedral. And we asked her to come on the show today because Kelly let us know that they're having huge difficulties around funding, they're losing money, jobs, and the work that Kelly does is in the community. And we at the Magic Minds podcast absolutely love anything to do with the community, whether it's here or any community. It's really important. We're all about community, we're all about unity. So it was absolutely fantastic to get her on the show. And she blew my mind, I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't expect the interview to be that good for me. You know, I knew she'd done great work in the community, but when you sit down and hear a person's story, you hear the absolute intrinsic love for community work and love for human beings. It just shone from her. You know, she talked to us about domestic violence group that was set up during COVID, the work that you do in the community. She talked to us about her father, Willie Bermingham, who was the founder of Alone. I went to school with her younger brother. I only found out just before we got going on the interview. I asked her and it was her. So it was absolutely lovely interview. And she's a lovely person. St. Patrick's Cathedral are struggling with funding due to the tourism, COVID-19 epidemic causing all that. But sure, look, lots of communities are struggling. But let us know what you think it is. Have a listen to the interview. It's an absolute gem. I absolutely loved it, and hopefully you will enjoy it as much as I did. As always, thanks to you for watching and listening. Thanks for your support on the social media. We really love it. If you like our work, please share with family and friends. Send your comments in. Give us a review on iTunes. Anything else? Noel Riley from Rooney Media Graphics. Look at this backdrop. It's absolutely fantastic. He does amazing work. Andy from Liberties Media Hub. The girls from Shannon's Hope Line. And you, thanks very much. Thank you very much for watching and listening and spreading love and kindness. As always, mind your little self. When you mind you, you're a better servant to your community and your family. Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, so alive. Welcome back to the Magic Minds podcast. I'm Matt Burke, and you're listening and watching now the Liberties #1 podcast. We are safely to say the best podcast in Dublin 8. Yup, the Liberties, yup, the Flats. On the show today, I'm joined by a special guest, Kelly Bermingham. What's the crack?
How are you? Are you well?
I'm absolutely fantastic. Thanks for coming on. How are you keeping?
Not too bad now. No, last day today in the Cathedral. So
yeah,
yep. The last day for the 6 months. I was laid off there last week because literally with COVID the way it is, you know, no income, no visitors, no nothing. So a lot of people lost their jobs, and I've been laid off. So today is literally the last day for 3.5 years of work. Just going into hibernation is the way I'm thinking about it.
Okay. Guys, I've asked Kelly to come on the show because Kelly is the community outreach coordinator at St. Patrick's Cathedral. As she just says, there's been a lot of lost jobs in the area due to the COVID-19, a lot of community initiatives lost, and you know, we are all about the community in the podcast, and we want to know about that. How can we help? How can the community help the St. Patrick's Cathedral? Yeah, so look, you lost your job today. How's that like for you after 3.5 years?
Well, I have to say, the news broke Wednesday week last, and it was very bittersweet because we had just been nominated for the Pride of Place Awards with Dublin City Council and Cooperation Ireland in recognition of all the partnership projects. And it's not just about the Cathedral, it's about all the initiatives that surround the Cathedral. The Cabbage Garden Initiative, which involves so many different community partners, Dublin City Council, the Guards, the Ivy Trust, the residents associations, the pitch players, the YMCA, the Scouts, everybody's on board with that. Just about improving the facilities, using it as a positive event space. It's a gorgeous little park. It's just the tiniest little space that's right between New Street and New Bride Street, Kevin Street and Long Lane. And it's just a fabulous space for everybody. So we started to create monthly events in there. That's a major interagency piece of work. Another one then is the Critical Initiative, which started up as a response to COVID for domestic abuse supports, that volunteers who are registered with Dublin City Volunteer Centre would send in donations or volunteer their home. If they have a home for rent, they'd put it forward and make that available for Safe Ireland to use for people who are emerging from domestic abuse. And then one of the other initiatives is our food programme, where we work with the likes of Liz O'Connor and the Liberties Breakfast Club and the Liberties Soup Run, who are just amazing people on the ground. So all these partners came together, showcased what we did for the Pride of Place Awards on the Thursday after the news broke that things were not good. And then the following day I got the phone call to say that sadly there just isn't the funding at the moment. We should be seeing in the region of 3,000 visitors every day coming through St. Patrick's Cathedral from all over the world. They come here because it's the finest 13th century building in the city, if not the country. It's the largest cathedral in Ireland. It is home to so many pieces of art that have been created by our ancestors. You go in there and you just see the beauty of the stained glass windows that were made here in Dublin 8 for the main. And, all the wood that has been carved. I can imagine ancestors of ancestors of ancestors that have literally created all these pieces of work since the 13th, 14th century. And you're stepping into a capsule of time. The 1850 bake of tiles that were replicated from the 12th century tiles. There's still 12th century tiles in the baptistry. When you go in there, you actually see the tiles that were there from day one. And that history, it seeps through the building. But it's also a place of peace and prayer and people coming together for so many good causes. And over the last number of years, I've just been so lucky to work in it. It's the most vibrant place. I love the bones of the place. It's incredible. And when you can use a place like that for events like Tradfest or like at Christmas, we had the Forget Me Nots choir in. And then you talk about all the different things that have emerged, like the Plastic Snake Project, an environmental project that worked with 400 kids in the area. They all gathered plastic from one day's single-use plastic from their lunch wrappers. And then they made this 32-foot long snake and danced it in like a Chinese dragon into the cathedral and sang a piece of music about single-use plastic and how damaging it is to our world. And then we took it into the Lady Chapel. So using the story of St. Patrick, banishing the plastic through the nave, the main body of the cathedral, the big long area, right up the aisle, around the thing, up the side aisles, back down the centre aisle, and then up the next aisle, out into the Lady Chapel, hung it against the beautiful architecture of the Lady Chapel, which was refuge to the Huguenots back in the 1600s when they fled France and they got refuge in the cathedral. We hung it in there and it was an abomination against that beautiful architecture. And that's what we're doing to our natural world. So these children immersed themselves in this project and created this piece of work that just represented so much change. And they provided the solutions. The children said, this has to stop. We need to use bamboo and glass and things like that instead of producing more and more and more plastic and just disposing of it.
Wow.
And here we are in COVID world where everything's wrapped in plastic and we're just...
How ironic.
It's terrible.
Isn't it? Can I just, in case I forget, can we go back to what you just told me there earlier a little bit? The domestic violence initiative,
sure.
From, I'm just hearing from media or people in my job talking about domestic violence has been huge during COVID, hasn't it? A raise. Can we talk a little bit about that just so we can be educated on it?
Well, I suppose 12th of March, the call was made by Leo Varadkar. We're closing schools tomorrow. And everybody was restricted to home. So we all know the saga that was. And from that day, I was working from home. And community work when you're at home, and I live in just on the borderlands in Kildare, over the border in Salbridge. And I'm from Bluebell originally, but I'm living in Kildare now. And I have to say, working at home and trying to imagine how can community work remotely? How can that change overnight? How do we transform how we connect with people? Because the connection is so important. When you're sitting with somebody and you're listening deeply, or you're working with somebody, or you're problem solving, and usually community work is reactive, rather than proactive. So when you're with people and you're trying to problem solve, that connection is really, really important. And how can we reimagine community work working remotely? It's really difficult. So I was kind of scanning the news, the environment, thinking about the difficulties that people face on a day-to-day basis, regardless of what their circumstances might be. And one of the things that was emerging in the very early stages as being a really big red flag was the issue of domestic abuse. And domestic abuse is not just about somebody getting a smack. It's about emotional abuse and financial abuse and control, and coercive control in particular.
Brilliant.
Which is a new legislative piece of work in Ireland, which is great to see that emerging as a new recognised situation for people. And the response to it is definitely there. Now, Safe Ireland is an organisation that works with 39 organisations throughout Ireland. They're the representative body supporting those services who work in all the different counties around the country. And we thought, okay, myself and Edwina Dewart from Dublin City Volunteer Centre were chatting on the phone about how things have changed for the community. And she was saying to me, Kelly, is there anything that we could do to support any organisation or any part of society with people volunteering from home, because we have a list of people who've signed up to volunteer from home. There's very little that people can actually do. And I said, well, I had a couple of ideas and I rattled them off, and I said, and the first one was domestic abuse. And she said, and how would that work? And I kind of said, well, we'd have to talk to somebody really who is immersed in it and understands it and knows it really, really well. So we had a chat with Lisa Marmion from Safe Ireland. And straight away we started designing and refining and thinking about how that would work. And for about 6 or 8 weeks, we considered it before we launched anything. And we tested it and we designed and refined and redesigned and then launched it on the 3rd. So we had the Ivy Trust came on board straight away. They gave us a space in Elvedon House, which is up in Cork Street. They have 50 units of accommodation there, but on the ground floor, they actually have a community room. And the Liberties Breakfast Club have been operating out of there. And we've been working with them with our Food Cloud account, which is another community partner. And
Wow,
we've been
love
just
hearing this.
kind of creating this movement of support.
Yeah.
And so we asked for 3 things. And I really think DHL should come on board, because it's donations, homes and letters. And the donations consist of really practical things that people need when they walk away from everything they have and they're standing in a refuge in the clothes that they walked away with and maybe a bag on their back, and that's all, and their children hanging on to them, if they've children. And what do they need? So they might need a personal hygiene pack or a food hamper to tide them over until they can get things sorted with payments. They might require household cleaning, because with COVID-19, we've got to be able to clean and keep everything disinfected. But you're walking into somewhere that is self-contained, because all the refugees had to transform their services and everything has to be self-contained. So they're the requirements, they're the basic requirements, and then vouchers, because literally if you only have a pair of pants and a bra on you and the one set of clothes, you're going to need to kit yourself out for a couple of days or a couple of weeks until you can get on your feet and find your way with the key workers that Safe for Ireland provide. So we respond, and we've been getting those donations in. And we've been sending those out. The community guards, Sergeant Ian Lamb and his colleagues down in Kevin Street have distributed those. And we've covered, in the space of about, I suppose, in the first number of weeks, we had 1,000 parcels given out. And we covered all of Dublin. Every refuge in Dublin got a full supply of everything that they required, because we ring them and we'd ask them, we check in and we go, look, how many families have you got? What do you need? Home starter packs was another thing, that when people are moving on from refuge, they might need a new duvet and new pillows and bedclothes and, a set of cups and pots and pans and cutlery and that sort of basic requirements. And you just have to think about what's it like to start from scratch in a life where you need to be safe. And you don't need to be scrounging for these things. You need a bit of dignity, you need a bit of support, you need a bit of respect. And the other thing we looked for was homes, for people to volunteer a second home if they had a space. They must be self-contained. That's very important for everyone's safety, with child protection and everything else that has to be considered. But that would be supported through Safe Ireland. They would do all the negotiation on that scale. And then the third thing was letters of hope and courage. And I actually have some of them here with me. I brought them with me today because they've been flooding in. We've hundreds of them.
Are you going to read some out for us?
Well, I will, absolutely.
Oh, that'd be absolutely
Do you want me to pick one out now?
Oh, I love you too.
So these letters are coming from all over the world.
Thanks very much for doing that.
Because
Jesus,
we just put it out on social media. So I literally just picked these up from the office today.
Oh, wow.
They arrived in. I haven't even opened these. So excuse me now if I just want to make sure that I don't identify anybody. But they are all anonymised. And there's usually a little note on them, so you can see that this one has "use in any way that helps," and there's just a little initial on it. I haven't read this, so it could be long. It is. It's a one-pager and it's gorgeous, lovely handwriting. Dear friend, I hope today you can consider a good day, the day you chose you over everything else. It doesn't mean it's not hard. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean you've got everything figured out. It doesn't mean everything is clear now. A good day means you are choosing to find you. Put you first. Find and build that peace that you need in this life. If you're reading this letter, I'm proud of you because even against the odds and circumstance, you chose to remove the chaos and move forward. Some don't have that strength, but you're different. You're conquering the fear and all the emotions that tie into the fact or the fear to become who you want to be, to a life of your own that you can control. It only takes movement. Not even big movement, like what you've already accomplished just to find this letter, but any movement. One thing a day to move forward is enough. You are enough. Some days that will just be breathing. Some days it will be something huge like finding a new path in life. Any movement towards the life that you want for yourself and deserve is a victory. Find your victories because you are that warrior and you do have the strength it takes. I personally know that even after there is a war, there is a battle. But when you're told long enough that you don't matter or physically held back from accomplishing what you want, then you have to retrain your mind to enjoy the win. Don't be afraid to continue to reach out for help because there will be bad days. But today is a good day. You are alive. You are loved. You have help. You are not alone.
Wow. Can I
And
just...
this is written by a 35-year-old female. She's got a full-time career. She's a single mum and she's a survivor of abuse from the United States.
Wow.
And she just said, you've got this.
Can I touch that? Jesus Christ. Where did that come from? America?
Yeah, she sent that from the States.
These are letters that were sent in to you.
Yeah.
From letters for support.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's an example of so many. There's so much heart in that.
Beautiful.
And so many people writing these
all
letters.
the way over here
Yeah.
to love and kindness.
So we're producing a book to compile with these letters, and the book will be given to everyone who comes into refuge. I've applied for funding for it, and please God is good. Please God, we will get that funding to make that book possible because it'll help somebody to map their journey. And we'll have the letters on one side and a page for reflection and notes for the person reading it, for them to respond on their own journey and help them map their own year of
and that's
the first steps.
DHL.
Donations, homes and letters.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So that's just one letter. And look, that's today's post. That's literally, I collected a batch yesterday.
Wow.
And this is today's batch.
And how do you get them to the people?
Well, what we do is we scan them.
Okay.
And then we send them out to Safe Ireland and then they're circulated. And the key workers choose which one is appropriate because some of the things in them, you'd have to consider who's receiving them as well. Okay. And we don't know if there's going to be a trigger in that. And then there's also vouchers come in with that as well. People send in like one for all vouchers or vouchers for some of the stores around the country that people can go and buy things for themselves. So people are sending those literally to St. Patrick's Cathedral addressed to me with Criticall on it. And Criticall is actually an acronym. Critical, as in critically important, but community response team call. And the two eyes are the eyes in the community. We are your eyes. We see you. Okay. We recognise that you're in pain. We recognise that things are wrong and that's injustice and that we have to change that. And by small actions that we and everyone who supports this project are making those steps, and we're making a resounding, beating kind of a rhythm of people who are saying this is not good enough, we need to change this. And that movement of people is sounding well loud in this country.
Wow.
and beyond this country. Like that's just, there's the UK, there's the US, there's Belgium, there's Germany, there's Brazil. There's from all over the world, people are sending in those letters.
Fantastic.
And it's such a privilege to read them.
Oh, my heart is hopping on my chest here. Do you know what? When we talk about cuts and we talk about people losing their job, it's this stuff you don't see. This is the ripple effect of what cuts look like on the ground. Like that might look like, just a letter from some lady from America to Ireland, but that can save people's lives. That can change families' lives. Mm-hmm. Not just the lady or the man that's gone through the domestic violence, but the children.
Yeah.
Like, this is where the cuts happen. And this is what happens on the ground. And this is like, people think, it's the cathedral, the rich, the church. And it's this shit here that we're losing, Yeah. That's amazing. I'm blown away by that.
And it's the volume of the letters coming in. And also, like, people allude to the fact that they have different experiences themselves. Like that person disclosed anonymously, albeit, that they are a survivor of abuse. But at the same time, there's a gentleness in that. And then also the fact that some of the children who have survived living in a home that was filled with domestic abuse have come forward and said, my mum or my dad didn't have that support, so I want to give that support to somebody now who might be struggling. And I don't want any other child to go through what I went through as a child, witnessing my mother going through that or being a victim of it in my own home as a child. That has to change. And if I can write a letter to do that, or if I can donate cleaning items, or if I can donate a food hamper that'll make somebody's week easier so that they can get their kids back to school. Like we put out an appeal as well, coming up to the back to school time, that we would look for back to school kits. People brought in incredible donations, huge volumes of items, like back to school bags, brand new school bags with pencil cases filled with everything a child could possibly wish for. And the most gorgeous, like I was almost wishing I could go back to school, because these kits were just amazing to see coming in. Copybooks, gorgeous pens with fluffy things on them, boys, girls, you know, it didn't matter who received them. They were bought with it, the intention of sharing and giving something that would relieve the pressure on somebody who's really struggling to keep things together, because it's not easy. When you step away from that, it's really, really tough.
Wow. I'm really overwhelmed. But you know what's really jumping out at me here? You, the person, is coming out. Tell us about you. Why do you do what you do? Like, your soul seems to be bouncing out here. You're so driven. You're so passionate. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why do you do what you do?
It's the right thing to do. I'm very lucky in my life. I've had a really good start in life. I think I'm very privileged. I've had a good education. I've had a good home life. I've had challenges in my life as well. But I mean, you know, if you can do something, one small thing every day to make someone else's life a little bit easier, why wouldn't you do it? Like that's easy to do, and it's not a big thing. If we start thinking about it like a big thing, then it becomes huge. And if you start trying to think about solving the problems of the world, that's huge. You can't do that.
That's a great point. People think it needs to be worldly, not just your everyday act of kindness.
And it doesn't have to cost money.
Smile,
a chat
nice
with
word,
somebody.
text out a random text to somebody.
Yeah.
Just say, "Are you all
An
right?
extension
How
of
you
kindness,
doing?" Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And a friend of mine put up a post yesterday on Facebook, and she was sitting on a beach, just enjoying the day, enjoying meditating and looking out at the sea, and there was a stony beach, and she'd taken a selfie, and she said somebody stopped and said, "How you doing? Are you okay? Just checking." And what a lovely thing. And she was really touched by that, because she thought maybe if she wasn't okay, maybe if she was having a bad day or thinking dark thoughts, that person could have changed her day. But it actually did. It kind of reinforced for her that humanity is strong, and people connecting in the most gentle, simple way.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay?
It's fantastic. You know,
Changed her day.
I would have thought of that years ago. You know, I'd have randomly thought about people, and I'd want to text them, say, "What am I thinking about them today?" And I'd want to text them, and I go, "No, do you think I'm mad?" But over the last number of years, 4 or 5 years, I don't do it anymore. I just text. I just go, "I was thinking about you today. What's the crack? How are you getting on?"
Yeah.
Like, you know, and it's really important. It costs nothing. And a lot of people say, "No, I'm grand, man. Everything's all right. Why? What's up with you?" I'm just checking. You just popped into my mind.
Yeah.
But other people say, "Jeez,
Reminding
I'm delighted I heard from you. I was actually thinking about you last week and made connections again." It's so important, isn't it?
Reminding them that you care enough to think of them. And that's a simple action. And, you know, it doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be, you know, huge. It doesn't have to be life-changing. But it could be just the one thing that would change somebody's day. And I used to work in a service station years ago. And like that, you'd have people coming in, and they might be just living on their own or whatever. And you'd never know. They're just coming in, and you go, "How you doing? What are you getting today? Oh, that's grand. How's life? How's the grandchildren? How's this? How's that?" You just remember little things about people. And that might be the only conversation that person might have for the whole day. And so never underestimate. It doesn't matter whether somebody is mopping a floor or is the CEO of an institution. Every single person has something to contribute in this world, and why not let it be a good thing to contribute? And I try every day to do something. Don't always succeed. You know, it's just little things.
It's your intention.
You know, that's the intention. And, you know,
Where did it start for you? Where did your journey begin before Cathedral?
I landed in the Coombe back in the 70s. My parents, my mother's Roscommon originally. My father's a Dublin man, born and reared in Inchicore. And I was born in Bluebell. You know, that's our family was reared in Bluebell. And I lived there until I was about 17. And I suppose our home was, you know, if you were two-legged, legless, feathered or not, you landed at our door if you needed something. It was that kind of a house. And my mum was just an amazing woman to welcome everybody into the house, regardless of what they needed or where they were from. And, you know, we had a very early kind of exposure to social justice kind of things. When women were banned from home if they became pregnant out of marriage, my parents used to take people in. and they would look after them until
I
they
can
had their
see
child.
where this comes from now.
Yeah.
It's deep ingrained in you from
Yeah,
child.
well, it
I
was
love
it was a changing Ireland, you know, and like I'm only in my 40s. And, you know, it's not that long ago that that was taboo in Ireland to even discuss that. And, you know, it was such a judgment on people. And who are any of us to judge? The man above is the one, as far as I'm concerned, that's our judge and jury. We face our God when we pass from this life. And, you know, that's really how I would see that. And none of us choose the path we're on. We don't choose the life we're born into. We choose how to be. And it's not always easy to make good choices. And sometimes you're born into a life where that becomes difficult. And, you know, that's difficult to live with as well. To live with consequences of things, you have to be forgiving of yourself first and foremost, but also forgiving of your circumstances, because you don't always have a choice about what you're born into. And so our house was a house of welcome, a house of hospitality. There was always an extra place at the table, regardless of what we had. At times we didn't have very much. Our house was burned to the ground back in the 70s, in the late 70s. We lived in a caravan when the house was literally one wall left standing. And then we moved into what was the stores out the back. My dad used to deal with antiques. He was into all sorts of different things through his life. He was a bellhop and he was a fireman, and he was, you know, his job was to be a firefighter, and that was his first and foremost passion in terms of his work. He joined Dublin Fire Brigade in the 1960s, and he was an antique dealer, and then he started an organisation for supporting the elderly. That was run from our home. And so literally the house is like O'Connell Street, revolving door, people in and out, whether they were dropping off donations or, you know, of dropping off clothing or whatever was required, or collecting hampers to deliver to somebody if they were a volunteer. Maybe they'd call to the house, and we were on the phones. So from the age of 5, I was like, hello, 509-614, you know, and writing down. I had directions. My dad had given us all directions. So we knew different bridges on the canal and how to direct somebody from those areas. We knew different pubs around the city. So back in those days, we didn't have mobile phones. If my dad was on duty in the fire brigade, he'd be working from 9 till 6, and we'd know there was an emergency. We'd get a phone call maybe at 6 o'clock in the evening, and he'd be just gone off duty. He never drove for as long as I've ever known him. He never drove. He had an accident way back early on in the 60s, and my mother was the driver, so in more ways than one.
No pun intended.
Every pun. And they had a great relationship. They spoke often without words. It was just a glance or a look or the nod, because my mother has the look.
Oh, Jesus.
And you know the look, the mammy look when you're in
Jesus
trouble.
Christ.
And I got that many's a day. But there was a sort of a lovely ease with which things were done. And it was about doing the right thing for the right reasons, not for glory or for anything like that. It was all about this has to change. And whatever it was, it could have been anything. And so anyway, the major focus was on the elderly and their need and their plight. But we used to ring around different places. So they'd say, well, look, he went up Poolbag Street, or he went across the Liffey, or he said he was going such a place. Because he'd always leave little clues as to where he was going so that we'd be able to track him. Because no mobile phones, which is hard to imagine for kids today, that they don't know how to track and trace. How would you ever get by without a mobile phone? But we knew how. And we'd have people looking out for him going, has he passed you yet? You know, because you'd hear him before you'd see him. He used to whistle. He had an incredible capacity to whistle a tune. Pitch perfect, but he could not sing. God love him. He was awful. Like we used to slag him about that, something terrible. But that was my upbringing and living in that kind of a busy home life environment. And I never realised how unique that was until I was in my 20s. And one of the ladies who my parents had invited to be buried with them, because she had nobody to bury her here. And she was buried, and I was one of the principal mourners, and there was very few. There was kind of rent a crowd, as my dad used to call it. They called the bereavement group from the local community, and a couple of representatives. And I think I was the only one who really knew her, along with one other. And it struck me then, this is why he did what he did. This is the poignancy of it. Leaving this life with nobody to bid farewell. And the funerals today with COVID-19 are reminiscent of that, very strongly reminiscent of that time. And it's heartbreaking to witness. It's heartbreaking to to see people bid their farewell from a distance when it's such an important ritual for people in Ireland. And again, that's another area that we're going to have to really adapt ourselves to in the delayed grief and how we mitigate that together as a community, that we need to find a way to create that ritual, to replace that time. We've pressed pause on grief for so many families in Ireland, not just in Ireland, internationally. And really that's very, very difficult because it's still there. It's like the monster in the back of your head, because grief will get you, because it hits you when the first of everything comes in, the first Christmas or the first birthday without them, or the first happy occasion that they should be there to celebrate and witness with you. And we're going to have all those firsts coming up as we come through this, the rest of this life, emerging from COVID.
Wow.
And it's really important that we mind each other in that.
So as you were saying to me, grief, it just pops up everywhere, doesn't it? Well, you know, you can suppress it for so long, but as you said, it's like this hidden monster. First Christmas, first birthdays.
Yeah, and I mean, it's 30 years since my dad died, so there's still days where, you know, it seems like it's very surreal. It's like another life, that somebody else lived that life and got to know him and spent time talking to him. And I was just coming into adulthood as he was on his way out, let's call it. And it was just, it seems like another life. But then there's days where you just go, God, I really miss him. I'd love to have the chat. I'd love to sit down and wonder what he'd be like in his 70s now. You know, he's forever 48 in my head. You know, he'll never be.
He died at 48.
48 years young, yeah.
Wow.
Cancer, probably due to lack of self-care. And, you know, my work ethic obviously comes from home life. He was a workaholic, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, the man literally lived on 40 winks. That's what he used to call it. He'd say, I'm going for 40 winks. And he would literally go down, put the head down. He'd bounce back off the pillow less than half an hour later and he'd be gone again. Somebody's in need, have to go. I've somebody picking me up. It might be Lee Mulcooney, who was his right hand in running the organisation, and my mother was his left hand, and she was at home looking after. There were 5 of us at home. I was the eldest of the 5, and the baby was 5 when my father died. And we still call him the baby. He'll hate me for saying that.
And we only, myself and Andy, we were talking about here before you came. Willie Bermingham is your dad. He's the founder of Alone. I know he went to school with your brother in James Street.
Such a small world.
We had a young lad sitting in here last night, a young rapper from the Liberties. He went to James Street. Andy went to James Street.
There you go. William originally went to Drimnagh Castle, and then he went on to James Street to do his Leaving Cert, and then he took up an apprenticeship as a truck mechanic, and then he got into Dublin Fire Brigade. And my mother always said it, if he didn't get into the fire service, we'd have a raving lunatic on our hands, because since the time he could walk and talk, William wanted to be a fireman. And
just like his dad.
He just wanted to be his father. And I think, you know, that's just a natural thing. The firstborn son wants to be. And for me, I would have loved to be in the fire service, but it wasn't an option for me in my time. Like, I finished school in 1990. It was several years later before the opportunity for women to come into the service went public and into the domain. And there was a slow creep, I think, but they've really progressed. There's a lot of women in Dublin Fire Brigade now. And of course, being a combined emergency service with the ambulance and the water rescue and the fire service, it's an incredible service. And it's a credit to the city and the city council that, you know, we've got such a good, efficient city service, even on the shoestring that I'm sure it is, given the size of the city, the growth of the city, upwards as well as outwards. And, you know, you just look at stations and how busy they are. And if you're on the ambulance, God almighty, you don't get to stop at all. Like, from anyone that I know in the job now, talking to anybody, literally you go in and you're on the calls, you're out day and night. And with COVID, how they have managed to pull through and continue their service is just amazing. And I think they're a great example. Like, I've had, as I say, many substitute fathers. Dublin Fire Brigade is literally like a family. And I remember when we were growing up, my father would say to me, anywhere you are in the world, if you're in bother, you go to the nearest fire station, tell them your father's a firefighter, they'll look after you. And that has always stood. And no matter who, like Joe Cooney was my dad's best friend in the job. You know, he'd several. He actually had some really staunch friends. Terry Webb, Joe Cooney, Jimmy Cummins, Eddie Sheehan. There's so many of them. Desi Davis, and he handpicked the ones that he wanted to carry him for his last journey. And he actually was buried out of St Patrick's Cathedral. So what a privilege for me coming to work with the cathedral, and 30 years after his funeral. And it was a funny story, actually. I was in college, in All Hallows College, and I was living on campus, and I'd been invited. Obviously, the college closed down. There's something about me joining places and things going not so well. But let's not go too far into that. But I joined All Hallows College in the January of 2014, and the following June, they announced that the college was going to have to close, which was so sad because it's such an historical institution in the city of Dublin, but also about the missionary work that would have emerged from there, going out all over the world. And anyway, I was there, and I was invited as part of my degree. I needed to accelerate my programme of participation and in order to finish out. And I was invited to do a summer school with the Felician Summer School, who were over from New York. And there were other Irish people on that. So there were about 25 US citizens and then 5 Irish. And one of the 5 Irish was me, and one of the others was the cathedral manager, Louis Perminter. And we had the crack. I could hear the bellow of laughter from his table, and there was great banter at my table. And we were just having the crack with the people that we were partnered up with, because they put one Irish at each of the table with the Americans, so that we weren't all in a clique, you know, all the Irish together, all the Americans together. We mixed up, and we were having great skit. And at the break, I had a chat with Louis, and I said, where do you work? You know, and he went, St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I said, what a special place. And he said, really? He said, what's your link to it? Like, what's your experience of it? And I said, well, my dad was buried from there. I said, and it turns out Louis carried the cross for my dad's funeral. He was the verger, he was the crozier on the day, carrying the cross. The crozier is the person who leads the coffin up the nave of the cathedral. And it snapped me into a moment of, oh my God, just what are the chances that I would be on a course with the person who carried the cross for my dad's funeral? And that was in 2016. And I offered there and then to Louis, I said, look, I'm looking for an internship. I said, I'm going out to the United Nations. I spent an internship in the UN, and I needed one here as well. And I was out in the United Nations with the ECOSOC, which is the Economic and Social Forum, and I was out there for a fabulous experience. And then here I volunteered to work with the cathedral, and I looked at the volunteering programme and made some recommendations, but I immersed myself in the cathedral life for a couple of months. And the person who I was supposed to be assigned to was the community officer, and that was Evan Walsh at the time. But the day I started, he had left the week previous. So I ended up working with Andrew in the education department, and we worked together and looked at different things. And that was from, say, the September through to the December. I was on a sabbatical from the HSE to finish out my degree and accelerate what I needed to do. And I had gone to Belfast for an interview, and I was working 4 days a week in Belfast. I had just got the job, and I called into the cathedral on my way back because my mum lives in the Midlands. And I called in to sign off on my final documents, and they said, what do you mean you were up in Belfast for an interview? Are you looking for work? And I said, yeah, I am. They said, well, there's a job going here and it closes at 5 o'clock today. Can you get your CV into us? And I went, what's the job? And it was just, well, community officer. And I said, I thought you had somebody, because I just assumed. I didn't ask the question. I wasn't intentionally looking for a job, but that was how I ended up working in the cathedral. I applied that day. I think several of us were interviewed, and I've never looked back. I started on the 10th of April 2017, and it has been the best career move I ever made. I absolutely could not have designed a better role for me as a person, being satisfied in my work. The autonomy, the support, the can-do attitude, the values of the cathedral, and how they mind people and how they support people. It's such an all-encompassing organisation, and every single person in there has become like family. And we all say that when you come onto the team, you're family. Once you're in the cathedral life, it's an embracing place. It just has that sense of welcome and
suits your personality. You are made for that job. I'm picking up from our conversation that you're a spiritual person.
Yeah.
Do you think your dad is with you all the time?
Always.
Yeah.
I only have to think of him and he's present.
I
as far as I'm
I
concerned.
feel that from you, and I feel that, and I can see now. That's what I was trying to get earlier. Where did it come from? And it's shining out now through your dad, through your family, through your ancestral past, which is fantastic. We touched on something earlier about this grief being suppressed, and it's the monster behind. And this is going to lead me back to where we talk about domestic violence. Do you think that's coming down the road? You know, like these cuts are going to further push this down more. What's your thoughts on that?
I think we're really in a very risky time.
Yeah.
The recession in 2008 plunged people into a very deep and dark recession, but a lot of people had a cushion. They had a few savings, they had a credit union account, they had enough to get through, and they just about got through. A lot of people didn't do too well and suffered badly. Many people haven't built up enough of a cushion to get through this unless we really look out for them. And I think that's the danger zone for a lot of people who are on that cusp, on that edge of the poverty line, let's call it. And poverty is much more than just a lack of money and a lack of means. It's a lack of resilience, a lack of capacity to cope with the stress and anxiety that comes with a deep recession. And we're facing into a very deep, dark winter. And this, in Dublin 8 in particular, we've got the Golden Mile, which is theoretically, say, from the Cathedral to Guinness's and Trinity College. So you've got that kind of triangulation of three major tourism spaces. And the city relies heavily on tourism for revenue, for its economy, for jobs, for the life and, I suppose, survival of the city. And we don't have visitors at the moment. And it's now we're beginning to see how heavily reliant we are on that trade of tourism and visitors who love to come to experience our culture. And we're in dire risk of going down a very dark road for the winter. And it's going to be a long, cold winter for a lot of people. So our elderly are going to be quite vulnerable. We need to really look out for vulnerable members of our society, people who you know there's a bit of a want, or there's a bit of a need, or there's a bit of support required, or people who are struggling or who are too proud to ask for help or support.
Of course.
But to watch out for those people as well, because that's a risky place to be. And we to mind each other in it, because it's not a bed of roses for everybody. Even though it might appear on the surface that people are getting by, there's a lot of people struggling behind closed doors in this city. And we have to really enhance our community connections. There's a lot of apartment blocks that have sprung up around the city. We have new Irish living among us. We have to reach out to those people and create that connection. Get to know the people across from you, above you, below you, around you, in your living areas, your living spaces. We can't exist. We're not built to be solitary people and solitary citizens. We are interdependent. And so that connection with everybody is really, really important. Greeting your neighbour, knowing who your neighbour is, extending warmth and extending yourself to other people is really important. And it might just change your journey. You know, if you're struggling, greeting somebody else and giving encouragement to someone else might just change their day. And it might be the very thing that connects them into something that they've never heard about. And it can be random banter. We're great at talking about the weather. Sure, look, we have a constant stream of conversation here if we start out on that. But it leads to other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Something is just jumping out at me here. You talk about the programme with the domestic violence, the Cathedral. What happens to those programmes now? Where does that go? Where do these people go for the resources?
Well,
like, what happens to them now? Do they just...
I'm really, really, really lucky and blessed in my life. I can't say how lucky I am. I have a new job. I'm going working as a community consultant with the Ivy Trust. Now, the Ivy Trust were the very first ones to step on board with the Critical initiative and gave us the space in Elvedon House. I'll be working with them.
Brilliant.
And as part of that, the Critical and the food programme are going to continue. And the Cabbage Garden Interagency Project, which they've already been a partner on for a very long period of time, since 2017, since I started working in the Cathedral, they've been on board with that. We've the Residents Association, Eddie McGuinness is part of that, and he heads up Dublin Pride. Along with Jed and a number of other people on the board there as well. There's really great work going on through that Residents Association. They raised over 30,000 in the Kevin Street
doing
estate
the bingo
during COVID,
and all, yeah.
balcony bingo, and it was really well put together, and And, you know, a lot of charities like Shannon's Hope Line, who are featured here today, Lisa and Sandra there doing all their great work. They're
deadly, aren't
superstars. And, you know, people like that, you know, they get to raise that sort of money. So the Ivy Trust came on board. And so I'll be working for them for the next 6 months on a specific assignment, a community assignment. And I will get to continue these projects in that. But a lot of the other pieces of work that I would have done, the sort of incidental things, the events, the things that pop up from time to time. Like Glenn Hansard did a gig in the Cathedral as part of the Jonathan Swift Festival in, I think it was 2018, and raised €10,000 for local projects. And that covered cross-care teen counselling, 2,000 to them. The Alice Leahy Trust, working with people who are homeless in Bride Street, and she's amazing working with people who are the most marginalised of the homeless community. The Little Flower Penny Dinners, we had an education programme where we taught sign language and first aid skills to people to enable them to connect with people who are on the sides, or if somebody was living in the city and they came across somebody unwell, that they'd be able to help them out. And there was another project, NALA, the National Adult Literacy Association, for a Dublin 8 literacy project, helping adults with literacy difficulties.
Yeah, they help out Air Service actually. They give us funding, you know, if we want to, you know, get in sports or want to get in drama, we can apply to grants through them.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic. You talk about your dad 40 winks and minding himself. How do you mind your little self?
Well,
what do you do to look after you?
The joy of working in the Cathedral is that you get to be in a place that is deeply spiritual, and the services are glorious. So if anybody hasn't been to a service in the Cathedral, the music just transforms everything and transcends everything. So you can just allow the music to bring you to where you need to be. That's my connection with God. For me, that's just how it is. And then obviously you get to hear the readings, and sometimes things resonate from the different readings, and it's quite a simple thing at the end of a working day. Just popping in the 5:30 service. You need to be there probably about 20 past. Get in, get your seat. Obviously now with COVID, it's going to be restricted numbers and everything else. But, you know, I think we can have up to, correct me now, but I could be wrong. I think it's 50 at the moment. I have been zooming in because I'm not working in the city. I'm working from home. I've missed that. That's one of the things that I've really missed. So I zoom in at the live streaming from the Cathedral. You know, it's just about that connection. Music is huge for me in terms of a spiritual connection, and it doesn't have to be, like, one of my favourite pieces of music is Arvo Part, Spiegel im Spiegel, and it's the most gentle piece. I highly recommend it. It's just gentle piano, gorgeous, gorgeous piece of music. And if I'm having a bad night's sleep or something, I'll put that on, and that just sets me off.
Do you meditate?
Yes, every day.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow, love it. I'm a huge meditation fan, yeah. You should check out our Magic Minds meditation page. Mm-hmm. Get some of that into you. Deadly.
Tune in regularly.
How do people get involved if they want to support on your project, if they want to help out? What do they do? What do they need to do for you guys? Well,
the Cathedral right now is really in crisis. You've probably seen the roof works. It's like the doozers on Fraggle Rock. They're all up there putting up the Meccano style, fantastic construction of scaffolding to enable the roof works. The roof hasn't been done since 1850s when Guinness did the restoration. Benjamin Lee Guinness, he funded with his own personal funds the restoration of the roof. That's a €9.2 million project. The Cathedral itself is a 13th century building. It's there since 1192. So the roof really, the slates were sliding off it. Like literally there was a chunk the size of your backdrop here that came off the roof. And you could have put a car through into the upper roofs of the higher roofs of the Cathedral. So that has all had to be stripped back, new slate put on. They finished the main body of the Cathedral, which is called the nave, the long part. They're on the crossing now, and then the third phase will be the top part. We're short about 3.4 million. So if you have a fiver Friday, throw a fiver into the Cathedral. It doesn't matter how much it is. If you can give anything at all, that would just save the Cathedral. Yeah. The problem is, for community work to continue, I envisage being back there in the springtime. Please God, things will turn right and we'll have a stream of visitors back in to sustain the Cathedral work. We don't, as a non-profit agency, we don't accumulate money. We don't accumulate profit. Everything goes out on our day-to-day operations, cost between 5,000 and 7,000 euro to keep the place ticking over. So that's something that people can actually do. And if you see anything coming up on social media, keep an eye on the Cathedral page, and you might be able to come along and support an event.
Did I see? There's a GoFundMe page, isn't there, that was put up?
I shared a donate page on the Cathedral on
Right.
my website, on my Facebook page, but there's the Cathedral page, the homepage, www.stpatrickscathedral.ie, and it's stpatrickscathedral.ie. There's a support us page there that people can sponsor a slate, maybe in memory of somebody, and you know, you can give any level of it. You can, the suggested amounts of 50, 100, 250, any amount that people have. But if you want to give a fiver, that's perfectly okay too.
Absolutely fantastic. I have a question. I've heard that the cathedral is sinking each year. Is that true?
No. It is on an
Was
island.
that going around being said? People
I'm
said
sure
every
it
year it
probably
goes down
was.
an inch.
Not at all. No, sure. Look, if that was the case, it'd be long gone. It'd be long under the river Paddle. The Paddle goes around us.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that's part of the Cathy Scuffle. If you ever get a chance to listen to that,
Oh, she's brilliant.
fantastic
We had her on the
historian.
podcast.
She's amazing.
She's fantastic.
She's amazing. She's a mine of information. But that's the story there. So no, we're solid. We're an island cathedral.
Come here, you're absolutely, you have to blow me away in this. What's the one thing you would like people to take away after listening to this interview?
Appreciate where you live. We've got culture and history all around us, and you can be part of the history. So, you know, there's things that you can do to make history, and it doesn't have to be huge. It can be something very simple. But even just recognising the building you live in, or the vicinity that you live in, and appreciating the sort of the ancestors, the people that went before us, what they gave to us in terms of architecture, and you can be part of the architecture if you create something in this life and in your life that your ancestors and your descendants will get to look back and go, well, that's what they did. So just do something. Don't do nothing.
Don't do some.
Do something.
You know what? You're after blowing me away. I didn't expect this interview to be like this. I didn't know much about you. You know, I've talked to Errol, Andy, you know, and I'm blown away by your history, where you've come from, the impact of your dad, the work that you do in the community. It's clearly coming from your heart. This is something you love and you love dearly, and that shines through.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's a privilege.
Yeah, like people say great words. Andy was saying lovely words about you earlier. My girlfriend said lovely words about you. And now I met you and I'm thinking, wow, the community really needs more people like you. I say it to Andy all the time. Andy hugely loves the community. I love this area, but not the way you or him, the way you speak about it. You're driven by it. And that comes out in you. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm in awe of you, actually.
But I actually love humanity. And it's not just about place. It's about your sense of who you are in the place. And so the place is important, but you're just as important. So know who you are, know what drives you. If you're curious, and stay curious, be curious about life and immerse yourself in whatever you're passionate about. And you'll never have to work. I don't feel like I'm working.
Yeah.
I'm doing things that really inspire me to keep going. So it's, you know, Einstein had a saying, things in motion stay in motion. And so if I was to sit still and do nothing, then nothing would happen. So I just keep going with there's momentum with projects. And when you have momentum behind projects, they can become anything. They can take you places that you never imagined that you'd be. And I never imagined that I would be so lucky to work in St. Patrick's Cathedral. And I will be back. As Arnie said, I'll be back.
All right. I was sitting here going to myself, that is typical. Doing a job, if you do a job you love, you're not working a day in your life. I'm sitting there thinking that, and now you've just basically said that to me.
On same wavelength.
Absolutely. Kelly Bermingham,
pleasure.
the community are so blessed and lucky to have someone like you to do it. That's why I keep telling Andy, get back into the community. He's a great servant to the community, loves the liberties. He's a top man, and you two are absolutely fantastic. It's an honour to have you on the podcast. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
You're an absolute star. Guys, thanks very much. Don't forget to share this. If you can help in any way, please do. Support St. Patrick's Cathedral. Support the liberty. Support your community. And as always, please, 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 as Kelly said, mind yourself. Look after yourself. Mind your little self. Take care. Bye-bye.